Jeff, thanks so much for coming in. You are serial entrepreneur, taken multiple companies from founder to public companies. You are probably most famously now the HBS professor of the most coveted course, Launching Tech Ventures, and you have been in AI since the 80s, if I'm allowed to say that on camera. Most recently wrote The Experimentation Machine. So tell us why take this moment to write this book. You only produce content when you know that there's a moment in time that has to be addressed.
Yeah, well, first, I'm most famous because I was your professor.
That's right.
So that'll be my claim to fame 10 years from now. And I think that, as you noted, we are in a moment where founders are realizing that these AI tools can be used personally to build incredible, productive, effective organizations that pursue product market fit. I think there was a moment in time early on where people were confused because they thought, if I'm not an AI company, do I really need to learn AI and use these AI tools? And that moment is gone. The moment of today is, doesn't matter what I do, if I'm a service business, a tech business, I can leverage these AI tools to become what I refer to as a 10x founder, to be 10x more productive and more effective, just like the mythical 10x developer. I know Sid's a 100x developer, but mere mortals who are 10x developers, now you have anyone who can be a 10x founder. And that's what I felt was the compelling reason to write this book.
And Sid, you were very involved in the pre-read of The Experimentation Machine as a 10x developer and 10x founder. What do you think Jeff got right here?
I think his focus on the shift from adding more heads to solve a problem to where can I use AI to solve. I was just going through the book again. I've been a early access reader, and that specific thing is so important, right? Because you can have AI agents do anything as of today. If there's an API, it's in English, and it can be automated, and the AI agent can do it, right? And as we've seen the one-person billion-dollar company being mentioned so many times, that I firmly believe that's a reality. And essentially what we're doing at Blitzy is enabling that in a way, because you can build software autonomously, you can go on to maintain that software completely autonomously, and you can have agents work for you. So I think that is my favorite part about the book, the 10x founder. That's the favorite chapter.
I think there's a journey that we're all going to have to go on where we realize, as you said, that anytime there's a job to be done, I shouldn't first think about filling that with a human being. I should first think about, is there a combination of human and AI agent, or perhaps AI agent alone, that can perform that job to be done? And so, look, I don't know if we're going to see the one single employee founder, solo founder, billion-dollar company, but could we see the 100-person, 10-person, 5-person? Absolutely. Because once you get that critical mass, you're going to see people leveraging AI teams and AI agents more effectively. I had one founder the other day tell me that she was thinking about this notion of employees and joiners coming with their team of AI agents. So instead of hiring a cluster of engineers who bring a product manager and a product marketer and a designer, you could imagine hiring a solo product manager or a solo designer who brings their cluster of AI agents, who they've experienced how to build actual product with, and now can come into companies and just turbocharge their development process.
Absolutely.
It's like every employee is their own little agency of sorts, which is fascinating. And I understand there's a late edition of Blitzy to the book. One, we need confirmation. Is it true? And two, what pushed you over the edge to get us in?
I thought that the Blitzy story was such a compelling story, and in particular the way you all have used agents internally. You've used now, I believe, 3,000 agents as part of your product development process. And I thought the construct of agent specialization was really powerful. I think there's a little bit of a misnomer about AI agents, that they're going to be the Uber agent that does everything for you, the chief of staff that performs every task. That's not the beginning of the AI agentic future. The beginning of the AI agentic future is what you all have implemented, which are highly specialized agents that perform one task and do it very well, and might have as an input the output from a previous agent all along the chain. And just as you all have done with your translation from technical specs to code to testing scripts to reviews of testing scripts and along the chain, having this notion of specialized agents I thought was a very important concept. And so that's why I really wanted to bring in the Blitzy story and the way you've used these specialized agents in your own product development process.
And are you seeing this? I mean, we think of this as agent coordination with a lot of test time compute. Are you seeing this at Flybridge across a lot of the other companies you guys are looking at?
We are, and in fact, one of our investment themes now is around agent management.
Mm-hmm.
We have to invest as early stage venture capitalists thinking about the future.
Yeah.
So the companies we invest in today at the seed stage are companies that are going to be mainstream adoption 8, 10, 12 years from now. I recently wrote a little bit about Zest AI, which is a company we led the pre-seed round in 15 years ago, which was an AI application company for applying machine learning to credit underwriting. And when we went to banks 15 years ago, 12 years ago, 10 years ago and said, use machine learning to make credit decisions, banks said, you're crazy, I would never do that.
Yeah.
It sounds super dangerous. I'm sure the regulators will hate me and I'm afraid of it.
Yeah.
And now today, having made it through 10, 12, 15 hard years, Zest AI is being adopted by hundreds of banks because everybody realizes, of course I'm going to use AI for credit underwriting.
Yeah.
Who wouldn't? And so there's a moment in time where you have to ride this adoption curve. So our thesis around AI agents is that in 8, 10, or 12 years, when companies are employing more agents than humans, they're going to need a management layer.
Yep.
And so we are investing in a lot of startups today that represent that management layer, whether it's authentication or orchestration or management or explainability, but thinking through a world where every company has thousands and tens of thousands of agents. What are the tools they're going to need to manage those agents? That's the hypothesis we have today about the future.
And maybe Sid, you could comment on the complexity of this challenge and the unlock when you're able to do that, because we've been working on coordination now for, I guess, 14 months.
Yes, and I think I'd like to also highlight that you've been involved with Crew AI as well, to some part of it. And Crew AI is one of my favorite agentic AI frameworks, because it highlights the challenge you have with agent orchestration. When you have multiple agents, right? An agent, you can define it in multiple ways. For this conversation, it is an LLM with access to tools, right? And you can have multiple agents coordinating, and each of them has to assume a different role, ideally, for it to make sense and for the system to operate efficiently. And Crew AI makes that simple because you can designate teams and you can have agents performing the job of those teams, and you can have hierarchies like a supervisor or a manager, and then that coordinates all of this. The reason I bring it up is if you think about what we've done at Blitzy, we've built this engine that can dynamically recruit agents, have them specialize in a task, because you're not really training an agent to have it specialize in a task. You're giving it a different set of instructions and access to a different set of tools that help it to focus on the task, right? All of the training that the agent needs to execute on that task has already been done at that point. So essentially, what you're doing in that sense is you need to be able to estimate the complexity of the task at hand, recruit the right number of agents, and then execute and coordinate that process, right? And in that process, there are multiple things that you need to handle. Like, for example, there can be failures. Agents can make mistakes. And when you have the appropriate amount of guardrails in place, let's say from an accuracy standpoint, from a security standpoint, that's when you have a functional system. And these agentic AI frameworks make that possible, which is why they're a great thing to watch out for and appreciate.
One of the things I've been thinking a lot about lately is what are the killer apps going to be for agentic AI? And you all are clearly in one of them, which is in coding and software development. And that seems to be an obvious one, and probably the first one that's going to be realized as a mainstream use case. There are a lot of conversations about B2C killer applications for agentic AI. And one of the things that you said that I think is terrific is this notion of the agents having a task with guardrails and then taking actions. And those actions are going to be across a range of surface areas. So you might see an agent booking a reservation, executing a credit card payment, making a phone call, sending a memo. There may be a whole range of actions across a whole range of surface areas. Orchestrating that, testing the quality of that, ensuring that the guardrails and the goals are being followed, that's going to be, I think, a really interesting area for future development.
Yes, and we're only scratching the surface with this. The reason I say that is, what we're doing with Blitzy really, we started on this super early, back when O1 did not exist. No one was talking about this. We were doing test time reasoning. So if you watched the CES keynote of Jensen last night, then he had a chart where he had pre-training scaling, post-training scaling, and test time reasoning drawn out separately, right? And we have these three kinds of scaling laws that are now operational. And we haven't even scratched the surface for test time reasoning, right? We saw what OpenAI was able to do with O3. By burning a lot more compute, they were able to solve some of the hardest challenges of ArcAGI that has not been done before. Even with the state-of-the-art Kaggle results, OpenAI bested them by at least 10 to 20%, and that is a significant feat. What that means for agents is that the inaccuracies that we are seeing today, the limitations where you cannot rely on agents to complete some tasks, we're now seeing that if you allocate some thinking to it, quote unquote thinking or reasoning, right, where the agents think through their task at hand, their problem, where they maybe involve other agents that are specialized on a different set of tasks, or are built by maybe a different model provider, or has been trained on a different data set that makes it suitable to validate this agent's work. When you have thinking or reasoning like that pre-validates the task and clarifies what the agent is supposed to do, you're going to see a significant improvement in accuracy. So as we talk about these frameworks, enabling agents to reason out of the box is going to be a game changer going forward.
So one of the things I think is quite interesting is how will agent programming become accessible to non-technical users? So the journey of no code and low code and just even visual basic programming has allowed this incredible proliferation of software development capabilities into the hands of a much wider audience. The agentic AI systems of the future are going to want to do the same thing. There's going to want to be a similar sort of construct, but the interface for that construct might be conversational.
Yes.
You might have a conversation with an agent to direct them and to effectively program them. It's a different way of thinking about what programming actually is, but to direct them and task them, much as the way you have a conversation with an employee, to direct them and task them. And I wonder if you've seen that as a potential opportunity to explode agent usage.
100%. I think the earliest tool that does this even today is ChatGPT. So when you go into ChatGPT and you select O1 or maybe O1 Pro, right, depending on which tier you have, it reasons for you beforehand. And that's what it's referencing as thinking time, right? Another example of this, tooting my own horn, but Blitzy. When you put in a prompt, you're operating in the workspace where you're doing things that you do on a daily basis, right? Developers write documentation about code on a daily basis. Product managers write PRDs about what the product should do on a daily basis. When you're able to operate in that space and then let the system decide whether it needs to use 1,000 agents or a few agents, that is an optimum user experience. So far, the kind of agentic AI and tools that we've had, they expect developers and or humans to do prompt engineering. Now, prompt engineering is a skill. For a long period of time, we saw positions being created for prompt engineering, and that was a hot job, but that's no longer the case because we are now seeing the proliferation of more tools that let you rely less on prompt engineering, ChatGPT and Blitzy being one of them.
I think the opportunities for creating called no-code, low-code agents is directly corollary to the ability to just build software. It is just another layer of software, right? And English is the ultimate abstraction layer above software that we've been working our way up towards over time. But I think what's maybe not as obvious is the level of specialization that is required in the agent systems to be able to do AI native workflows in code generation. So if you use any of the like ChatGPT, Claude, anything like this to try to work with LangChain, Crew AI, it's going to really struggle, which tells you like, oh, maybe we're much further away from using code gen to build these no code or low code agents. But that's actually a problem that Sid solved recently. So maybe you can share about what is coming with the support of LangChain, some of these AI native applications with a tool like Blitzy.
Yeah, I think a lot of the, we've, so far in this conversation, we've left out RAG. And RAG, or retrieval augmented generation, is where all of these LLMs, they have a training cutoff, right, of October 2023, and they are trained on public data sets. So this enterprise might have its own private data that the models are not trained on, or there are tools that have evolved significantly since the models cutoff, and you now have documentation that does not exist in that training database, and you want the models to be cognitive of that. So we've built our own proprietary RAG system. It's based on graph RAG, and we crawl the documentation of all of the leading tools, all of the leading API providers, SDKs. We support the Open API schema. We support custom SDK documentation, and that allows us to augment the code generation process to enable that recent data, so that when we generate code, it is always up to date. You don't have these deprecated packages. So what happens if you use old versions of open source packages, which you will if you're using tools like Claude, because they're using the old knowledge cutoff, periodically security vulnerabilities are found and patched, right? And then the old packages become deprecated. And if you use that code directly in production, you are now introducing those vulnerabilities in your application. But having a system like this, which we are shipping in mid to end February, will let developers not have to worry about that. And you'll always get the latest version, including the changes that went into that version. So you don't have to spend hours reviewing your code and making sure that it is up to date.
So
I love that example. It's so cool because conceptually what you just articulated is where I think a lot of this is going, which is these self-learning systems that recursively get better and better in this autonomous fashion. So your example of you'll never be out of date with the APIs in the universe because we will always ingest the most recent API documentation and always improve and update the code, thereby eliminating tech debt. There's this concept that's coming out of Japan right now. You guys have probably heard about this, about the notion of an AI researcher who is doing ML research, but it's an AI agent doing the ML research and trying to submit a paper that will be peer reviewed and accepted in a AI forum. So this sort of notion of being able to set the agents on a task where they can recursively improve and get better and even learn themselves how to generate the code that's up to date, or breakthrough research ideas, or solve problems that we haven't even conceived of, as long as they have this overarching task and framework and set of knowledge. And I think that's a really exciting area. I don't know where that's going to lead, but when OpenAI talks about their 5 levels of AI, and level 1, I'll do this by memory, I think. Level 1 is the chatbot. Level 2 is agentic. Level 2 is maybe reasoning and thinking. Level 3 is agentic. Level 4 is organizations. And level 5 is this researcher, this ability to actually problem solve and invent and create new areas of research and new areas of scientific discovery as an AI agent. I think that's going to be incredibly powerful.
I think if we also think back to what Sam Altman said recently, is that we've now, earlier we had this problem where data was the bottleneck, right? And we didn't have enough data to specialize on or train on. But now data is no longer the bottleneck. Compute is the next frontier, right? For that bottleneck. And what OpenAI, Blitzy, and a lot of the other companies that are focused on advancing the frontiers of intelligence are doing is that they are in the business of creating data, of generating data synthetically, and or plugging into data sources that only they have access to. In case of OpenAI, when it's the way it built O1 and O3 was that it did reinforcement learning based training with human feedback. So they hired a bunch of humans whose job was to review what the thought process that was outputted by GPT-4o, and then use that to train the model and build O1. So there's a lot of chat about O1 being actually a super version of GPT-4o, and then O3 probably is tied to GPT-5. But this process is interesting because, like the experiment in Japan, it tells you that you can set agents to a task, right? You can have them generate a ton of data by making explorations, and you can go back and use that data to then improve that model, right? And we're going to see that as the next frontier. And this is a place where it moves across post-training and test time reasoning, right? Because using test time reasoning to generate that information, and then using post-training to improve the model, and ultimately, once you've cleaned all the data up and you've got more feedback from users, you will bring those learnings back into pre-training. And by that time, hopefully, compute will have scaled to support better pre-training.
The opportunities are in the domains where there is a source of correctness. Because if there is an opportunity for feedback of, we ultimately wanted to get to here and it took us 30 steps to get there, we can just feedback what we got in step 30 as the right answer. It's going to be much more efficient in solving it, and then be able to do much, much harder problems. And so in code, you have that, right? Like it ran or it didn't. And you can look at every step, and we log every step in path to get there, and have this really clean data set of what we call like these like agent scrolls, because if you were to just print it out, it would be across the side of this room for just one run. But that is proprietary data of like what our agents are doing to get to correct. That allows us to be really, really tight on when we do train our own models.
I think what's really cool to me as I reflect on the speed of these capabilities and tools that are coming into organizations, having this impedance mismatch with organizations' ability to embrace and adapt to change.
Yeah.
And that conflict is going to be an incredibly fascinating one to navigate. And I think the best organizations are going to be the larger organizations who can be nimble and encourage change management and encourage these new methodologies. Because the companies like yours and other startups that are starting from scratch, they're going to begin with the base tools that are so powerful and 10x better on every dimension. They're going to just kill the competition. So you're going to see this incredible competitive fervor between the startups that are using the newest tools and the incumbent companies that haven't yet adopted the newest tools, because they have all these organizational barriers and points of friction and bureaucracies. And that's going to be a fascinating, I think, new lens on the competitive landscape.
You're in a position of high trust, being at HBS, but being the czar of startups in some people's mind that took your class, and then there may be executives or board members. So what are those conversations you're having when they're like, how do I tackle this? Like, how do I do AI adoption? I have 3,000 people I'm responsible for in my organization, and I'm afraid that we're going to get eaten for lunch.
So there are a couple of things I would observe, and one of the reasons I titled the new book, The Experimentation Machine, is that one of my themes is just run some experiments. Yeah. And one observation that I've seen is that there are top-down experiments and bottoms-up experiments, and leaders need to leave space for both. So I was with, the other day, the CEO of a large public company who, as soon as Microsoft came out with their agentic framework, he told me he immediately went to his CTO and said, let's try some experiments using this agentic framework and let's see what it does. Mm-hmm. At the same time, he's encouraged his staff on the ground to just try a bunch of things that they come up with. He saw the announcement, he's friends with Satya Nadella, he gets a quick preview on this thing, so he has a viewpoint of what to do from a top-down basis, but he's also trying to encourage a culture that's bottoms up. One or the other is not sufficient, necessary, but not sufficient. You need both. Mm-hmm. And so that's my theme, is run a lot of experiments. Some are going to be top down, some are going to be bottoms up. This friction between pilot to production is very real right now. If I look across our AI application software companies that scale to 2, 3, 5 million, where they're beginning to hit the wall is if they don't see enterprise-wide adoption by their customers. We have a portfolio company that has seen incredible adoption in 1 or 2 sites, but not 100 sites of their target customers, because these companies are just a little bit slow and hesitant to roll things out. So the other critical thing, I think, for the larger enterprise companies is to be able to set up the criteria for, look, if this thing works, if this pilot is successful, it can't be a dead end. We've got to really rapidly roll this thing out so that we can reap the benefits of the pilot and get the ROI or get the capabilities improvement throughout the entire enterprise at scale. So I think 2025 and 2026 are going to be the year of driving from pilot to production and getting out of the prototype ghetto and into mainstream production enterprise-wide deployments.
I would push back that responsibility falls with the startup because they hold the cool tool. And I think oftentimes what I see is a lot of people will jump at the pilot because it's a logo and they're going to get involved. But typically what we've seen in successful deployments is saying, great, we are happy to let you use this in an enterprise setting. It's a huge resource constraint on our end to commit to you as a customer to do this pilot. So let's make sure that these are the criteria that are success. And if we hit these, this is what it means from a commercialization perspective. And so we've actually slowed down deals to get the right stakeholders involved, because before they really get the enterprise usage of it, that's when they're most excited and most eager, but oftentimes they don't quite yet have the buy-in for what would ultimately be commercially viable and reasonable for us.
I think it's a super insight, Brian. So it sort of gets to a fundamental thing about enterprise sales, which is power. And there are certain people that have the power to agree to a pilot and to pay $100,000, but they are not the same stakeholders who have the power for an enterprise-wide deployment for $1 million.
Yep.
And a lot of startups in our portfolio and across the ecosystem get stuck in the pilot phase because they only play to the power of the pilot stakeholders, and they don't slow things down to make sure they get visibility with the power for the enterprise-wide accounts and enterprise-wide deployment. And I think being really clear up front about what are the criteria that you're targeting, what constitutes success, and if we hit those criteria, if we achieve them, if we achieve success, do we have the green light, or is there a whole nother process we have to go through?
And typically they want that to happen as well. They just also want a little help of defining it. And so it's a lot of defining, here's how we see it typically works best. We've seen if we do this for other organizations, here's the results that they got. Is that also true for you all? Yes. Okay. Wow. This ROI case is very exciting. And like all of a sudden we're on the same side of the table as opposed to working across the table. It's like, it's very fun when you're in that situation.
About 8 or 10 years ago, we wrote a blog post about applied AI, and we had this framework we called AAA, which is, it's not just applied AI, it's absorbable applied AI. The organization has to be in a position to absorb the applied AI, and not all organizations are in that position. And some organizations have become quite good at running experiments and absorbing pilots, but not absorbing enterprise-wide. And I think you're right, it's up to the vendors and the startups to coach their customers on how to absorb this technology and these new capabilities enterprise-wide.
Yeah, I talked to a Fortune 50 CTO 2 weeks ago. They were running 800 pilots, and I'd asked how many they had adopted out of pilot phase. They had adopted 0. And so for us, it was signal. 1, I was like, we're not working with Fortune 50. We're working with Fortune 2000. I'm not working with the Fortune 50 right now. But 2, I'm like, that's actually a red signal that like we are not going to put resources into this right now because they don't have the last A. You guys were way ahead of the ballpark on the A absorption. So what signals do you typically see or hear from the CTOs we talk with that are the most positive for their ability to actually absorb this technology?
I think from a CTO standpoint, if what you're doing for that company, if it is addressing one of their top 3 priorities, that is a great entry point. For most CTOs that we work with, one of their, no matter, the top priorities might always be growth or some other metric that they're working to satisfy the CEO. But there's always
everyone's trying to satisfy the CEO.
Yeah. But there almost always is tech debt somewhere, because they have this goal that will increase the productivity of the engineering workforce by 10x, but they cannot ship that change because there's this refactor that has to happen before, and that's going to be the next unlock. So if you can get into that org and show them value on that small use case, which is quote unquote small because it doesn't unlock their top 1 or 2, but it unlocks a ton of other use cases that then it's sort of like they're dependent on this to work, really, to push their roadmap. And that's the kind of situation we want to be in. The other concerns they have that might stop them from pushing you is, do you have the right level of compliance? What is your security posture, right? How easy is it for me to integrate? Is this going to be something I have to follow up with people and support them on? Or is this something I can just sign up for and expect people to use, and you can handle the task of onboarding and coaching them?
You guys may remember this from my class, hopefully, but
don't test us right now. You just tell us again. Yeah.
It rhymes with something I say in the book, which is timeless methods, timely tools. There are timeless methods about finding the must-have hair on fire value proposition. Is it a top 3 priority for the organization? Truly top 3 priority, truly hair on fire. Is the tech debt at a level where it's holding them back and preventing them from executing on their roadmap? Unless you find the must-have value propositions, and that's been true for decades and decades of technology sales and sales of other kinds, it doesn't matter how cool your tools are, how cutting edge your technology is, it ain't gonna sell. So timeless methods really, to me, in that framing, is all about using your discovery techniques to make sure as a vendor, as a software provider, that you're really looking for the pain. What is the top 3 priority that organization faces? And ideally, you can solve that problem. And if you can't, qualify out and go to the next one.
Right. And quite often it's like, when these CTOs are trusting you with something, if your product is literally the source code, right? It is literally company IP. The challenge there is they're not willing to let you in and give you access to the source code just because they don't trust you yet, right? But if you, like you said, identify that tech debt is indeed one of their big problems, it becomes easier to get in and deliver value on something that's small, because tech debt at that point is such a huge problem that they're willing to take that risk and let you do that. Or they might just, in our experience at times, they might ask you to replicate that same effect on an open source repository that is a parallel to their use case.
We've seen that be super effective. I look at anybody that's trying to get something done when they're talking with Blitzy, it's what is the value of what you deliver times the probability that I think you're going to deliver it. And so what we've started to do is just execute the results for the bigger folks, execute the results on an open source code base that is very similar to what they're trying to execute on. And that changes the probability of like, I've just met you guys the last few weeks, 40% to like, oh, now I'm 100% confident. And now I'm able to apply that to the value and move things forward. So it's de-risking within the sales process for folks in a way that you're able to show them value tied to their exact problem set.
And I'm very sympathetic to CTOs and CIOs who are hearing the same story from this sea of vendors, and they just don't know who they can trust.
It's gotta be exhausting.
It's exhausting. Yes. It's one of the reasons the PLG strategy, the product-led growth strategy, has proven historically so effective for software companies, which is, hey, top-down sales, it's just not gonna work well. We had this situation at MongoDB, which you guys know and talked to my partner Chip about, where if the salespeople in the early days had called on the CIO at Goldman Sachs, they would have never gotten that call back, replacing my Oracle database. You gotta be crazy. But when it's done bottoms up, driven by the product, developer adoption, and then suddenly the Goldman Sachs CIO is calling MongoDB and saying, I've got you in 100 instances around my enterprise. You're now mission critical. I need to know who you are and how to get better support from you all. So there is, I think, in the AI world, this tension between trust and bottoms up versus top down. And I know you all have chosen more of a top down approach, which I think makes a lot of sense given you're dealing with source code, and it's very hard to trust in a bottoms up way someone in your source code. There are other vendors who are doing more of a bottoms up strategy in the AI world, and it's just going to be specific to your business model and your product.
We've done a little bit of a product-led sales approach. If you want to refactor, you can't do that no touch. Like, you're never going to be able to do that no touch. But we do offer a slice of our platform that folks can use for free, right? If they want to create documentation based on descriptions, if they want to generate code for a new product. And what we found is that this is able to reduce the sales cycle pretty dramatically, because the first question that we were getting when we were full sales is like, what's the code look like? What's the code look like relative to the use case that I have in mind, right? And so we're able to answer that question, no touch. We have lots of Fortune 50s that are in the PL motion with us right now in the product, creating documentation. And so those are targets, maybe not for this quarter, but maybe this year, that can see that we're delivering something that's differentiated both in quantity and volume. And then that allows us to enter the conversation with our actual enterprise offering, which is, hey, we're going to need to sort of leverage your code base to get the most value for you all, but you've seen what we can do without touching your IP. And that makes it a much more interesting conversation for me on the sales side.
Well, and I think more generally what you're pointing to is we talk a lot about where's the new competitive moat for AI companies, and we've identified 3 areas. One is proprietary data, 2 is workflows that can represent a system of record, kind of solving that last mile, and 3 is really nailing the human-computer interface. And with respect to proprietary data sets, you need to know what are the applications that they want to refactor. What does their source code look like? We have another portfolio company called Noetica, which is in the legal AI space, and they focus on private debt transactions. Their customer is the law firm. And so they go to a top 10 law firm and they say, I'm going to ingest all of your historical corporate debt transactions. And then I'm going to have a system that will know everything about all the terms organized by bank. So whether it's JP Morgan's deals or Citibank's deals, what the sector is, what the size of deal is. I can tell you what the covenants are. I can tell you what the market looks like in terms of terms data and interest rates. But I need your proprietary data set for me to do that. Once they have that proprietary data set, they're locked in. And so again, it's this notion of don't be afraid to do top-down selling. If it gives you access to proprietary data, that creates a lock-in. It might slow things. You have to go slow to go fast. You have to slow down to go fast, as the old saying goes, but it can be a really effective way of establishing more of a proprietary moat.
At the end of the day, it's the other LTV besides launching tech ventures. That's lifetime value, like in those kind of deals, and they're going to stick around for a long time. So, any requests of Jeff while we're live on air? He was your favorite professor at HBS. So,
well, for context for the viewers, we started Blitzy while we were students of the LTV class, and throughout HBS, we read about 500 cases. And it was the most fun I've ever had in an academic setting. And Jeff is great at writing cases, and I'm telling him this for the 50th time, but I firmly believe Jeff. I hope that one day Jeff writes a case about us.
That's the goal.
When you get to sit in the LTV classroom as protagonists.
So now we have the video to go along with it if we can pull it off. So, well, any closing remarks about folks getting access to the Experimentation Machine, where to find you all at Flybridge?
So the book is now available. You can get pre-ordered at www.jeffbussgang.com, and it's going to be available on Amazon next month. So easy to pre-order today on my website, easy to order it on Amazon in the next few weeks. And no, I think it's I'm excited for feedback from readers and particularly founders as they begin to use these tools and go on their journey to become 10x founders.
Awesome. It's been a fun one and a pleasure, Jeff. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.